We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
What goes through your mind when you hear the term mental illness? Go on, I'll give you a second to think about it. Okay, now I bet I can guess what came to mind when I said mental illness. You probably thought about a family member, a friend, or an acquaintance. Someone you know who has a mental illness. No? Okay, if I didn't guess right, let me take another crack at it. School. I'll bet you've taken a class in either high school or college.
Depression. Past the... anyone?
And somewhere between class cutting and taking naps,
Wake up!
you've developed a vague idea about what a mental illness is. Still wrong? When I said mental illness, it probably triggered for you a memory of something you saw in the media.
Was apparently treated for serious mental issues.
He is a human being gripped by a severe mental illness.
Sat back and went, oh, here's a guy who's got a mental health issue,
Sure.
and he was following ISIS on the internet.
Maybe on a website, a TV show,
I worked a crime scene where a schizophrenic hacked his father to death.
movie,
What's it called?
Advanced delusionary schizophrenia with involuntary narcissistic rage.
regardless. A mental illness can be an intimidating and often confusing concept to understand. In this quick segment, I'll be shedding some light on some of the basic concepts of a mental illness, and hopefully dispelling some of the myths and misconceptions about what a mental illness is. According to the National Alliance for Mental Illness, or NAMI.org, a mental illness is an illness that often interferes with a person's ability to think, rationalize, feel, or relate with others. Now you might be saying, wait a second, sometimes I don't think very clearly and I have mood swings. Does that mean I have a mental illness? Calm down. Remember, a mental illness is both frequent and debilitating. This means that it's an illness whose symptoms occur with regularity and often inhibits a person from functioning in day-to-day life. So if you're sad because you just broke up with your boyfriend, that doesn't necessarily mean you're suffering from depression. Or if your good days turn sour because a coworker's driving you up the wall,
my wife's making her famous deviled eggs. My waistline's furious. It's a bad time, Bob!
that doesn't mean that you're suffering from a mood disorder, like bipolar. Though if you get that mad at work, maybe counseling isn't such a bad idea.
You know, that's just like your opinion, man.
And just because you shriek at the sight of a spider doesn't mean you have a full-blown phobia. A mental illness isn't the result of one incident or flare-up. Whether someone develops a mental illness often depends on some combination of genetics, environment, and lifestyle. Having a stressful job or experiencing a traumatic life event, like being the victim of a crime or returning home from a war zone, can increase the susceptibility to developing a mental illness, such as post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. These, coupled with biochemical components and brain structure, also influence the likelihood of developing a mental illness. So you might be wondering how many people are affected by mental illness. Well, here are some statistics on mental illness in America. 1 in 5 adults in America experience a mental illness. 1/2 of all chronic mental illness begins by the age of 14. 3/4 begin by the age of 24. Approximately 8.4 million adults have reoccurring mental health and addiction disorders. Approximately 26% of homeless adults living in a shelter do so with a serious mental illness. Suicide is the 10th leading cause of death every year. 90% of those who die by suicide have an underlying mental illness. Approximately 60% of adults with a mental illness receive no mental health services in the previous year. Almost 1/2 of youth ages 8 to 15 with a mental illness received no mental health services in the previous year. 1 in 100 American adults live with schizophrenia. 2.6% of American adults live with bipolar disorder. 6.9% of American adults live with major depression. And 18.1% of American adults live with anxiety disorders. So now you have a better idea of what mental illness is and what it's not. It also means that now you're more informed so that you can sort out the bad media representations from the good ones. In the next series of videos, we'll explore what it takes to get a diagnosis, and also take a look at some of the different kinds of mental illness that exists. But knowledge and understanding will take away most of the mystique, so that you can be a better support system should you cross paths with someone who has a mental illness. Or you might learn more about yourself and your mental illness if you've been diagnosed with one. Until next time, my name's Daniel, and this has been an Advantage Moment.